At long last, after the frustrations of early exits, after the 90 lost seasons amid a rebuild and contributing to the narrative of an Atlanta sports curse, the wait is over. The Braves are world champions, finishing the Astros in 6 games with a 7-0 win Tuesday night for their first title since 1995. This is Battery Power, Cory McCartney, along with Grant McAuley and Grant. This is a celebration, a moment that seemed like it was possible with what the Braves were building. Then again, it couldn't have seemed more improbable with what they had to overcome this season.
Wow, was this season not just a microcosm of so many storylines from years past? It felt like you had really just crammed in just multiple seasons into just one crazy ride for the Braves this year, and overcoming the obstacles that were put in their path, having to be resilient, having to find the next man up, really having to go out and find the next man so you could have a next man up. These were all things that the Braves had to do at some point in the season to get where they are. But 90 days ago, there was no World Series Braves. We're feeling it. It's happening. Go ahead and book your plane tickets, book your hotels, and get those World Series tickets as soon as they go on sale. There was none of that 90 days ago. This has been a very, very sudden Braves team that made a run through the National League East after the trade deadline to win the division. That was improbable. You're back in October. But now that you're here, last year, remember, you won some series. They did it again this year. They beat a Brewers team with a great pitching staff. Then they had to topple the ghost of October's past for them. That's the Los Angeles Dodgers, and they had lost several series in the postseason to the Dodgers in recent memory. That was another demon they were able to exercise. And then they get to the biggest stage of them all, their first World Series appearance in 22 years against a team that's been there before, but a team with a narrative around it that had them with a chip on their shoulder and had no shortage of storylines, but two clubs that I felt like they came in evenly matched, and the Braves were the ones who were able to execute. They hit when they needed to. They pitched when they needed to. They got enough out of the starting rotation in the final game we're going to be talking about from Max Fried. What a masterful performance there. And the bullpen was big time. But the new additions for the Braves really paved the way to giving this team the confidence that it could win. And they won on a regular basis after that trade deadline, rolling to the division series, the National League pennant, and ultimately hoisting the World Series trophy for the first time in 26 years. Cory, I know we're going to have a lot of fun on this show. I know there's a lot of different ways to look at this. And again, when we started this show, not even a month ago, I don't think that we were expecting to be talking about all of this, but I'm glad we did, and I'm glad we're here, and I'm looking forward to getting into all of it.
Yeah, it's been one hell of a ride. I mean, it took 111 games to get over 500 for the first time, 119 games to move into first place, 158 games to clinch the division title, all those personnel losses, and it all adds up to a seminal moment for a generation of Braves baseball, a generation of Braves fans. I mean, the big three, Chipper, Andrew, Bobby, those guys now have some serious company.
They really do. And it's one of those things that I feel like you knew the Braves were building something. They had been getting into the postseason. They had gotten a little bit further each year. I know 2020 was a strange season, but you're certainly happy to see what you feel like is progress for your club. And I would say the Braves could mark that as success. But their exit from the postseason should have propelled this team into this year feeling like, yeah, we've got unfinished business. Then all the storylines that hit them throughout the 2021 season, whether it was Marcell Ozuna, whether it was the loss of Mike Soroka, just when you felt like you were going to get him back. And then, of course, losing Ronald Acuna Jr., one of the best players in all of baseball, just before the All-Star break. You just knew that this club was going to have to figure out a way to win. But you could also look at it and say, if they did decide to kind of kick the can down the road and not go for it at the trade deadline, you couldn't have blamed them. There were a lot of people that said, really, what are you going to do? Maybe you should be selling some pieces off and preparing for next year and finding out what you've got in the minor leagues. Alex Anthopoulos was having none of that. He knew he had a team with an opportunity in the division at least, and he gave them the pieces that they needed to at least start to put things together again, and that's exactly what they did. You ran through a lot of stats when it came to the days that it took the Braves to get to 500, above 500, to get into first place, to hit those checkpoints that we thought they probably would find sometime in the second week of April, that it just didn't happen for a variety of reasons. I went back and looked at Fangraphs to see what the Braves' odds were to win the World Series before the trade deadline. 0.4% chance of the Braves winning the World Series, according to those postseason odds that are updated daily. I am really glad somebody saved that, because I knew it was improbable, but I had to see numerically the value statistically of just how crazy it is that this Braves club was able to win the World Series just about 3 or so months after trying to figure out a way just to put together a competitive lineup again.
Yeah, go ahead and insert that Dumb and Dumber line there. So you're saying there's a chance. Jorge Soler, Dansby Swanson, and Freddie Freeman all homered in the clincher. Freeman also adding an RBI double, and Max Fried spinning an absolute gem. May not have been a more fitting set of players to come up big, Grant. You have Freeman, that tie to the last era. He shared a clubhouse with Chipper Jones. Of course, Swanson and Fried, part of the two biggest deals swung by the previous GM regime. And then Soler, the World Series MVP, part of that trade haul that ended up sparking the season's turnaround. I mean, these were the guys that kind of summed up what it took the Braves to get down that route when you think about, from the days of Chipper Jones to get to this championship.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Freddie was a teammate of Chipper Jones. He was able to play under Bobby, at least briefly, in his young career and be around and in the organization when you had those ties to the glory days of the 1990s and early 2000s. Freddie's kind of seen it all. And then, of course, there were guys who came in and they're just trying to make it to their 90 days so that they may have a chance to say, hey, I played here for a while and maybe I'll be back next year. And we'll get to all of that, of course, as well. But you needed all of these guys. And remember Dansby Swanson when he came over in that trade, that was really this moment, this seminal moment for this rebuild that you knew it was going to be rough, but then you felt like we finally got someone who could perhaps lead the Braves into this next generation. And I don't know if he's at the front of the line for that. I don't know if that matters anymore, that conversation, but he was definitely present and accounted for in some of the biggest moments that the Braves had this October. Another big hit for him. He had a couple of those in this World Series, and it was very appropriate from Swanson to Freeman for that final out. And Freddie, you may have noticed in the NLCS, he kind of tossed the glove and the ball in the air as he went into the scrum. This one, he went the Jason Varitek 2007 route. He went ahead and stuck that in the back pocket on his way into that scrum, and I don't blame him whatsoever. I'm sure that's a ball that might end up in some version of a Braves Hall of Fame at some point, if not the National Baseball Hall of Fame. But Freddie Freeman's got himself one heck of a souvenir after this game. But, it's hard to really boil all this stuff down because I know from growing up a Braves fan my entire life, living in the state of Georgia, sharing this game with my grandfather, with my father, with the rest of my family, and then starting out with the Braves radio network back in 2005, I really didn't know what to expect and when to expect the Braves to get to this level again. We all just kept thinking maybe next year, maybe next year, maybe next year. Well, you can wake up tomorrow and know that the Atlanta Braves are still the World Series champions. It's a dream come true and not a dream that you just wake up from and have to hope that you get there one day. The Braves have realized something that took a lot of hard work, a lot of building, and a lot of overcoming adversity, including in the final game when I think we saw the first inning, the worry about what happens if you lose another player at an inopportune time. It was an almost, but not quite, and thankfully not at all for Max Fried, as he was able to avoid an injury and give the Braves the game of his career.
Yeah, I want to get into Fried for a second, and I'm sure the emotions that you're feeling shared by a lot of people across Braves country right now. But I mean, I think about Soler out for the NLCS with COVID. He was hitting 192 on a fourth place Royals team 4 months ago. He hits 300 in this series with 3 home runs, 6 RBIs between his World Series run and this historic LCS that we saw from Eddie Rosario. 2 pinch hit home runs from Jock Peterson, the LDS. You obviously saw a Adam Duvall grand slam in the game before this. I mean, those trade pieces, we've spent so much time talking about what Alex Anthopoulos did at the trade deadline, but you can go every step of the way in this postseason. And those guys were just so instrumental in that championship celebration that's going to be going on in Atlanta for days and maybe even months.
Yeah, some of these guys deserve their own parade or their own statues, kind of been the joke I've been making on Twitter. Rosario winning the NLCS MVP, Soler following it up after missing much of that series with the World Series MVP, and not just 3 home runs, but 3 go-ahead home runs, including beginning the World Series with a big-time bang with the first of those 3 shots, and then setting the tone for the Game 6 win with a 3-run homer that they may have said is 446 feet, but I think the tail of the tape is a little further than that. I'm not sure the ball's landed yet. It was obliterated, and you could tell as soon as that ball left his bat, he was watching it for a moment, but his immediate attention turned to the Braves dugout. He pounded the chest, and you knew he'd gotten all of it if the sound didn't tell you enough. Also, Luis Garcia was not looking to see where that ball was going. Yeah, a lot of big moments for these guys. Eddie Rosario, certainly out of nowhere, I think out of relative obscurity of the Indians' injured list, and having to come over and wait just to play a part for this Braves team. Adam Duvall, he did have the grand slam, but I think getting him back was just another signal that, hey, we know some things that have worked for us in the past. We know who this guy is. We know what he can bring in, and we need some consistency. And that's the kind of thing that Adam Duvall could provide. And he led the National League in runs batted in. And then we go back to the Jock Peterson deal, which was the one that really started the ball rolling. This is a guy who knew how to win. The Braves saw it firsthand in 2020 when Jock and the Dodgers were able to get past them and into the World Series and win themselves. But I think when Jock came over, he's talked about this throughout the run through October. This was a Braves team that just, it wasn't itself. It needed some confidence. It needed some character, if you will, to step up and maybe ignite a little bit of something. And he felt like that's something he could bring. And I feel like that's something that he did bring. And they needed a lift. And Jock was the first piece of that. And some big hits for him, of course, in the division series, in the LCS off Max Scherzer. These are guys we'll be talking about for a long time, even if this is the only time they spend in a Braves uniform. Again, that's part of the improbable nature of this Braves World Series championship. And I'm still going to have to get used to saying that. It's pretty great.
Yeah, by the way, that Soler home run and that reaction, there was some shades of Acuna there with him pounding his chest. It was hard not to see that and think of Ronald Acuna Jr. in that exact moment. You mentioned Max Fried. I mean, he was fantastic. Maximum max, if you will, 6 scoreless innings, 6 strikeouts, no walks. A little bit of Glavine-esque here, a lefty closing things out against the highest scoring offense like Glavine did in 95 against Cleveland. Couldn't have been a shakier start. And you mentioned the scariness of that. He allowed a leadoff single to Jose Altuve. Then Michael Brantley reached. I mean, we all remember what happened to Tim Hudson, that gruesome injury. And it looked a lot like that when he stepped on Fried's ankle in the process. Obviously, a play to the moment. You wondered why in the world aren't the Braves challenging this? Clearly, Brantley did not step on the bag at all, but Fried got out of that jam. Then he retired 9 straight Astros, 17 of the next 19 before exiting and handing it over to the bullpen. The struggles of those last few games, if you heard Fried's comments before this game, he didn't think that he was doing anything differently. Certainly, Brian Snitker had complete and utter faith in his young lefty being able to figure things out against this lineup. And those struggles, Grant, were an absolute afterthought with the performance he had in this game.
Yeah, somehow that first inning was an afterthought. Usually when we're talking about plays that can turn a game, and we've already seen one in this series when the Braves lost Charlie Morton. And yeah, he went back out there for a moment, faced some more hitters, but then you got the news and thought, this can't be happening here. Then you see a play like that just from the eye test. I mean, I tweeted out a still frame of it that had Brantley's foot squarely over the ankle of Max Fried, just thinking, I still can't get over that Max Fried was able to go from this to spending 6 shutout innings and dominating the Astros lineup, because that's exactly what he did. I think he was ultra motivated, and some of his starts, to me, it seemed a little bit deceiving, the final line, because I felt like a lot of the damage would happen very quickly, and then he looked like Max Fried again. It was just the results weren't what we were used to. I did see some stats. In fact, I retweeted one that was put out there that just lined up a lot of Fried's kind of advanced stats, some of his expected ERA or expected FIP, and just the general rate numbers for him. Everything was lining up from the regular season, even in the postseason, but the things that were not lining up for him were runs allowed. It just kept happening, and I'm glad that he was able to, on a night where he had an opportunity to close out a huge game for his team, the biggest game I would imagine, at least at this point, he's ever thrown in his life and maybe ever will throw, that he was able to step up and have this moment. October, as you've said many times, are where legends are made, and the legend of Max Fried got a huge chapter at his closeout performance, a la Tom Glavine in 1995. It may not have been the exact same thing, but the 2021 version looks a lot like what Max Fried went out there and did, and he was able to do so with a little bit of extra drama when we saw what happened at first base in the first inning. I'm still amazed that he was okay, able to continue, and I'm really glad that we're not talking about replay gone wrong again, as it didn't matter in that first inning. It didn't matter at all to Max Fried. He was able to shut him down and become maximum Fried on the night they needed it the most.
Yeah, I mean, beyond just, gritting it out or toughing it out or whatever you want to say after Brantley had stepped on him, I loved the way he pounded with the fastball tonight. Threw it 41% of the time, averaged 94.6 miles an hour, included the fastest he's thrown his entire career at 98.4 miles an hour, and he did that at the end of that first inning, right after he had his ankle stepped on. So it just felt like he had got the adrenaline was driving everything with Fried tonight. And as much as we look at him and wait for that big swooping curveball to come in and just, buckle knees, just the fact that he was establishing that fastball early and just going hard at it with tonight, I thought was a big indicator that we were going to see a ratcheted up version of Max Fried.
Yeah, going at it and locating and executing at a level to which we hadn't seen in a couple of starts at the very least. And, maybe the scouting report in the book on Max Fried was, hey, he's going to rely on this breaking ball. We can pick counts for fastballs. We can see if he makes some mistakes with these curveballs. We can wait him out and take our walks if he's not going to come right after us. There are a lot of things I think that might have been in play in the start against the Dodgers, in which he got roughed up, and the start against the Astros, in which he got a little bit roughed up as well. But that Max Fried adjustment period between his game 2 start and what happened in game 6, he found all the answers he needed to find, and utilizing that fastball, pounding the strike zone, getting ahead of Astros hitters, keeping them off balance, and then using his other weapons as he needed to. That was exactly what made him such a dominant pitcher in the second half of the season, and what has catapulted him to arguably the Braves' ace pitcher. I know you went out and got Charlie Morton because of his pedigree in the postseason, and we wanted to see at least a couple of more starts of that from Charlie. It just didn't work out. I know we want to see Mike Soroka get back on the hill, but right here, right now, Max Fried is the guy who's sitting on the Iron Throne.
Yeah, and he obviously, established him for that now. I mean, it's going to be hard to knock him off that top of the mountain after this kind of a performance. It was Freddie Freeman that delivered the exclamation point for the Braves offense, smashing a solo home run, 109 mile an hour off the bat, 416 feet in the seventh. The foundation of this team, its heartbeat. This had to feel like a culmination for Freddie Freeman. Obviously, he won the MVP last season. He said in his conversation with Chipper Jones, before this last year, that there was something that Jones had that he didn't, and that was a championship. Now they're on equal footing, regardless of what happens to him in the coming months, wherever it takes him. He's established himself in some truly elite company in this franchise. Johnny Evers, Hank Aaron, Chipper Jones, those are the only other players in franchise history who have an MVP and a World Series title. Obviously doing his part in keeping this team together through all it went through. Grant, Freddie Freeman's place in Braves lore is now very, very secure.
It is, yeah. 1914, 1957, and 1995. We've seen those banners for a long time. We've thought about the most recent of those, I think, more times than we cared to when it came to some of the postseason heartbreak and reminders of how long it's been since the Braves were able to reach the pinnacle of this sport and win a World Series. And now that's something Freddie Freeman very much has to go along with all of the personal accomplishments and accolades, which Freddie has never been all about that. That's not why he's played. That's not something that he's been quick to go out there and say he's chasing. It's just been the results of the hard work and dedication that he's had to this team. And it was great to see him front and center with some very big hits and long home runs in the World Series, and especially on the night in which you close it out, to be able to, again, like you said, put that exclamation point on that win. I think we all have watched enough Braves postseason baseball to know what it's like when things aren't going the way you want it to. Game 6, incredibly, was a game where you really didn't spend much time, save that first inning very briefly with Max Fried, wondering, hey, when's it going to go wrong, or having to watch something go wrong. This was a night in which everything seemed to go right for the Atlanta Braves, pretty much from the very first inning on, outside of a very, very brief moment. And that's rare. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that all of Atlanta sports is interconnected, but I am going to tell you that when it comes to the Atlanta Braves, you don't have to bring up the rest of what's been happening in Atlanta or Georgia sports, because it doesn't apply to them anymore. They're the champions of baseball, and they're going to be celebrating that and looking to get themselves geared up to win a few more, because they've certainly got a team that's capable of doing it.
Yeah, Freeman, by the way, told me in 2017, think about back when he was injured that year, that he came into the clubhouse one day for a Julio Teheran start, and he told Julio that he was going to have to homer and throw a complete game if they had any chance of winning that day. Freddie Freeman has absolutely seen the lows, and now for him to be on top of the world through all he's been through, watching this Braves team through this rebuild, I know this has to feel extra sweet for him, just being that foundational piece and learning how to be a leader, amongst a young clubhouse, certainly a culmination of things for him. And obviously, the story of Freddie Freeman kind of goes hand in hand with the story of Brian Snitker. It's been told so many times so many times this postseason. Obviously, a Braves lifer led to coaching by Hank Aaron. I can remember, Grant, the feeling around this team when he took over Freddie Gonzalez in 2016. The thought obviously then was, okay, they're giving this guy, just his opportunity, just kind of, checking a box. He's somebody who'd been demoted a couple times, just letting him have his opportunity. Yeah. And now obviously at 60, he got his first chance. Obviously countered everything that was happening in the game at that point. When you think about the way hires were being made, the kind of guys that were being hired. And now Brian Snitker is a world champion. And, you hear guys like Freddie Freeman say they wanted this so badly for him. There are few stories that are going to be better coming out of this postseason than the story of Brian Snitker.
Yeah, and look, we always can question and second guess the moves of Major League Manager on a given night, but I don't think there was much to think about and second guess and any of that kind of stuff in Game 6 of the World Series as the Braves won the thing. And there wasn't a whole lot really to speak of throughout October, save a thing here or there. But I got news for you. Every single manager is going to make decisions that don't work. They're going to make decisions that go counter to some piece of intel or some particular statistical analysis, because at some point you just got to pick something and go with it. But I would say he's done way more right than wrong for this team from a leadership standpoint, because he does a nice job of taking 26 guys and getting them moving in the same direction and keeping it that way throughout the course of the season. It's not trying to ride people into the ground in order to motivate them. It's not trying to overdo things and put too much on guys in order to try to snap out of a funk for the team. It's a very even style of leadership, but it's also one that I think has very personal touches to it. And there's something to be said for that. And this is not the argument between analytics and old school, because I think that the Braves, let's be honest with one another, use some analytics to their great benefit throughout the course of the 2021 run to the playoffs and all the way through the playoffs. But having someone who really represents a large piece of the Braves' history because of the time spent and the fact that a lot of these guys saw him in the minor leagues on the way up and have known him for a very long time, the comfort level and just the overall chemistry of that team, I don't know if you can quantify all of that. It may not show up on a stat sheet. It may not show up somewhere in all of the research that you do from the outside, but inside the walls of that clubhouse, in that dugout, and then ultimately out onto that field, this is a club that plays together. And Brian Snitker is the guy that helps to lead them, along with some very, very strong coaches that Brian will give a lot of credit to for keeping this clubhouse exactly the way it needs to be, leading when it needs to be led, leaving it alone when you got to leave it alone sometimes. That's I think the beauty of what the Braves have built in that regard. And then you got to have the players go out in the field and do the thing and, let their talent win out. And ultimately, I think the Braves just got themselves in a place where their talent was able to win out. We're not talking about an 88-win team entirely. We're talking about a team that from the trade deadline on was more like a 95 to 100-win team at the rate that they were playing. And that's what they showed up like in October. That's what they played like in October. And that's what they won like in October.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to say that Brian Snitker's success is in any way, shape, or form going to change the way managers are hired or looked at or anything along those lines, with the world of analytics. He was a special case. I mean, you mentioned it there. He came up with these guys. Certainly guys like Freddie Freeman knew him from their minor league days, and that carried weight when he came into that clubhouse as the interim manager. And those kind of guys, Freddie Freeman, Nick Markakis, went to bat for him to get this job and keep this job through even through a regime change in the general manager and the front office. He was the guy that they wanted to lead this team. And at 66, he becomes the second oldest manager to win a World Series behind only Jack McKeon, who won at 72 years old with the Marlins. So certainly a fantastic story. And as we think about Brian Snitker and what he accomplished and what lies ahead for this Braves team, certainly Freddie Freeman's future is going to be one of the biggest talking points as we turn the page. But there's a crowded outfield. Jock Peterson and Adam Duvall have mutual options on the table. These Braves are built for here and now and the future. Obviously, Ronald Acuna Jr. is on the mend. Mike Soroka's on the mend. This young core with Fried, Swanson, Austin Riley, Ozzie Albies. Grant, the window for this team is going to stretch well into the coming future.
It really will. And I know there's some big decisions looming, and we're going to talk about them on Battery Power all winter long. We're going to see how these things play out, what guys will be returning, and what it's going to look like for the Braves in 2022 and beyond. But in just taking a moment to size up what the Braves were able to bring over at the trade deadline and add to this team, you can't help but be amazed. But then as you really sit back, as you said, Corey, and look at everything that the Braves have already in-house, under contract, or are going to be trying to bring back, there's some hard choices, but some good choices, I think, overall for Atlanta when it comes to deciding what kind of moves you want to make over the offseason. None's bigger than Freddie Freeman. We're all excited about what the Braves have done and that Freddie Freeman has just won a World Series, but I think everybody wants to see him come on back and let's do the thing all over again in 2022 and for a few years after that. Get Ronald Acuna Jr. back in there, get this whole lineup clicking in a way that we know that I think that it can, and see what the Braves were able to accomplish in the long term. They went through that painful rebuild. They were able to really just kind of come out of nowhere, it felt like, in 2018, maybe surprise a few folks, get back into the playoffs. I felt like they had so much further to go in 2019. That was so disappointing in the way that you lost and got bounced out of the playoffs there. 2020 was just kind of what it was. There were these incredible highs mixed in with a very surreal feeling of, is this really the baseball that we're used to? We don't know, but we'll take it. We're thankful to have it back in our lives. But the Braves didn't get where they wanted to get there. And then it just seemed like 2021, they were never going to be able to get it going, get it all at the same time, all 26 guys heading in the same direction. But somehow, some way, they did it. And even if you didn't know all the names on opening day, you're going to remember a lot of these names for a very long time because this was a special group. And I think they've got a big and fun winter ahead of them to bring back some new guys, acquire some new players, and welcome back some familiar faces and line everybody up and do it again come opening day, running all the way through October.
Well, a lot to dissect in the future, but first, a parade, and the Battery is going to be bumping for days. A new generation of Braves heroes cemented. Celebrate Braves country. This one has been a long time coming. I'm Cory McCartney. He's Grant McAuley. And while the postseason's over, we are far from done on Battery Power. So make sure you subscribe, turn on those notifications. That's how you get alerts every time we drop a new episode all off season long. So pop some champagne, Braves country, and we'll see you in next time.